Hello, everybody, and welcome back to ArsenalAura. Today's episode is something truly special. We've got a guest like no other, ready to share insights and stories you won't want to miss. Thank you for joining in, and I hope you enjoy. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to ArsenalAura. I'm Mihai, and today's episode is a really special one. If you've followed Arsenal online at all over the past 2 decades, chances are you've read, listened to, or laughed along with something from my guest today. He's the creator of Arseblog, the longest running, most respected Arsenal blog and podcast out there. Andrew Mangan, welcome. It's really great to have you here. I've been following Arseblog for around 20 years, and it's kind of surreal to have you on.
I understand, and thank you, Mihai. Thank you for having me here, and hello to everybody who is listening. 20 years of being a reader or a listener to Arseblog. I think you probably deserve some kind of medal, but we have to sort those out yet. We haven't got them made up yet.
Yeah, maybe that's something we should look into. But so for today, I want to talk a little bit about how Arseblog started. A little bit on the evolution of football content, and of course, we'll get Andrew's take on all things Arsenal right now. So if you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to hit subscribe, leave a comment, like, and share with a fellow gunner. So let's get into it, right? So I'm gonna start this one with a big one. You know, a lot of fans and people out there are calling this the best Arsenal squad since the Invincibles. Do you feel the same way, or do you think we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves?
Ooh, there's a big question to start. I mean, the key difference, of course, is that the Invincibles won things. You know, they'd won the Premier League. They won it, and you know that sort of evolution from 1998. And then this period of 3 years when Arsenal didn't win anything. And then, you know, the double and then the Invincibles. And, you know, that's what sets them apart. I think if you look man for man or pound for pound at maybe the first 11, there was that bit more in those title winning squads, that bit extra, you know, that could win you games, that could get you over the line. And I think when we look back on that time, it's sort of hard to reconcile the idea that Arsenal had 4 of the best players in the world at that time in their team. Thierry Henry, Dennis Bergkamp, Patrick Vieira, and Robert Pires, who I think could have played for any club in Europe, any club in the world. And Arsenal were fortunate to have all of those players in the squad at the same time. And then you've got other brilliant players like Sol Campbell and Gilberto and Freddie Ljungberg and, you know, Edu. The quality was there, you know, and I think it was a different time, so you didn't need quite as big of a squad. So I can see why people say that the potential within this current Arsenal squad, I think, is very high. And we're all hoping that next season Arsenal can go the distance and win the Premier League or win the Champions League. But I think right now you have to err on the side of the people who actually won the trophies and went through those campaigns and you know, helped us lift that silverware. So I think there is more to come from this squad, but it's impossible really to say it's better than one that won the Premier League and went unbeaten all the way through a season.
Absolutely. And you know, Andrew, do you believe that I always thought since the end of the season, right? I thought that this is the season that Arteta needs to deliver, and not any kind of trophy. I don't think the cups will make it. I think he needs to bring a major in. Do you think that's the case? Do you think it's do or die for him? Like, if he doesn't get one of the majors, like even if let's say he brings in the FA Cup and the League Cup, I still don't think it's gonna be enough. What's your take on this?
I don't think it's do or die, but I do understand the contention that after 5-6 seasons, having come so close, it's time for Arsenal to win one of the big ones. I think what we've seen over the last couple of seasons is that Arsenal are close to doing it. And maybe in the season when we lost out to Manchester City, not the season just gone, the one previously, we won enough games and scored enough goals to ordinarily have won the Premier League that season. I don't think you can say that Arsenal weren't good enough to win the Premier League that season. It's just that we were dealing with a team like Manchester City, who are machine-like, who have the experience of winning, who themselves have a huge, or at least had a huge amount of quality all in its prime. And then there's the 115 other things that you could say about Manchester City as well, right? I do think that in another season, we'd be talking about this Arsenal team very differently, and it would be about, now, can Arsenal build on winning the Premier League that season and then go and do it again, or win in the Champions League? So I think there is this thing in football these days where everything is either black or white, right? You either win or you're a failure. You have to win or you get fired. I don't think things are that binary. I think there is a lot more nuance. And again, it all really depends on what you do or what Arsenal do this season. What if we get like 94 points, which is an incredible amount of points,
Absolutely.
and some other team gets 95 because they got a decision that goes their way in the first game of the season or the second game of the season? Can you say that is not good enough from Arsenal? Is it good enough to win the Premier League? Not this season, but as a performance level, it's probably as high as you could expect to go, right? So it is it's trying to look at things within that context, and look, we all want Arsenal to win. We all want Arsenal to win those trophies and to get to bring the success back that I think is overdue, not just for Mikel Arteta, but for the club. Right? It's 2004 is the last time he won the title. So it's overdue, not for Mikel Arteta, but for Mikel Arteta and everyone who came before him. But I don't see it as do or die. There is a world where it becomes a die situation. Like if the season is terrible, there'll be a lot of pressure. But I think we've seen that this is a team that has a lot of potential, and hopefully when we get through more of this summer and the additions to the squad come in, we'll be in even better position to go and do that. So for me, it's just too simplistic to say he either has to win the big one this season or he's fired. I don't think it works like that.
Of course. And so from what you're saying, I don't think we need to get the pitchforks out just yet. We need to give him a little bit more time and credit. Obviously, I think this is pretty obvious, right? But just to get it out there, because there's a lot of talk around it. The biggest area we still need to upgrade. What's that?
The forward line.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
No question. That I think that's the one where nobody will be satisfied this summer until we make additions to the forward line and that big decision about what striker is it going to be? Is it going to be Sesko? Is it going to be? I mean, it's the most boring thing I can think of right now, but it's still the most important thing. We're all so tired of hearing, one day it's Gyökeres, one day it's Sesko. Oh, they're negotiating. Oh, they've been negotiating a long time and nothing's happened yet.
Yeah.
I don't know if they're negotiating sort of once a day, like sending carrier pigeons or something like that. But that is the one I think where, until we make that decision, which I still think will annoy some people, because there'll be people who go, oh, they should have got that guy, but we went for this guy. But that is the one where I think it will give people at least the idea that when we go into next season, there are more options for goal scoring within this team. And I think that is probably where we fell a bit short last season, not necessarily because we didn't have the players in the squad, but what we didn't have was the depth or the redundancy to deal with an injury to Bukayo Saka, an injury to Kai Havertz, injury to Gabriel Jesus. 3 big injuries, which any team I think would have struggled to deal with. But, there can't really be any excuse for Arsenal not to address that particular issue this summer. And I think that's the one everyone is hanging on for.
Absolutely agree. And I think the whole Arsenal fan base agrees with that. Now, there's been a lot of talk if one player in the attacking line is enough, given the fact that we have Havertz, he's being used as a striker, and he did really well. He's a really smart and intelligent player, but Gabriel Jesus won't be back until towards the end of the year, and given how his injury at the World Cup, how he recovered after that, going through an ACL as soon as he did, not sure if he's going to hit the ground running really, really fast. There's talk about a winger as well, or something more hybrid like Eze or something like that. But do you think there's one player now in the squad or in the academy, or that we should sign that takes us to the next level?
So do you mean a player who has been linked with Arsenal already?
Yeah. Or someone in the squad that can hit 100% football maturity and go to the next level, like Odegaard or Rice or.
Sure. I think maybe the one I'm sort of curious about is Gabriel Martinelli, who I think has, showed real potential and then has plateaued a little bit. His output has leveled off from where we thought it might go. And I've seen obviously a lot of talk about how Arsenal need to buy Rodrigo or somebody like that to come in. And I'm not necessarily convinced Rodrigo is massively better than Martinelli, particularly when you consider the fee we'd have to pay and the wages we'd have to pay. So I do wonder if he's a player you might be able to get more out of next season. But I do think there are other players as well. Bukayo Saka, still only 23. Havertz is back. If some of the burden is off Kai Havertz because you have another striker, another player to play in that position, do you get more out of him? Do those two players, let's say you bring in Sesko and you have Sesko and Havertz, there's going to be competition. Do those players bring out more from each other? So I think those are the interesting dynamics about this summer and what Mikel Arteta might be thinking about doing tactically with his team, which I still can't quite figure out yet, because you look at the names. Eze is a player who you mentioned, who I think is a brilliant player, and I'd love for Arsenal to sign him this summer because he gives us something a little bit different, whether it's in midfield or whether it's in the front three. I think there's just something different about him than any other player that we got at this moment in time. So that kind of variety and tactical variety, we won't really know until we see fully what Arsenal do in the transfer market this summer. So I think that's another aspect of where we go and how we try and improve on what we did last season and the seasons before.
I'm really happy that you brought Martinelli on the discussion and as well, because when I read your blogs and listened to your podcasts, and I know you've mentioned as being a sort of a maverick player, and you're right. And I think the closest player that we have to a maverick right now in the squad is Gabriel Martinelli. At least that's how I'm seeing. But in his first season or his first 2 seasons, Martinelli showed that, right? Do you think that then he became a little bit too overcoached and he got into a certain pattern of coaching, and also the pressure of having to do the defensive side really strongly, right? going back and forth and so on. Do you think there's a chance, if we do sign Eze, that this will happen to Eze as well, like being overcoached and getting a little bit out of the Maverick area?
I mean, maybe we saw some of that happen with Jack Grealish at Manchester City, for example, but he was very much, and I guess there are similarities there. You know, Grealish at Aston Villa and Eze at Crystal Palace, similar in that they were the focal point of their team. They were the most exciting part of their team, and there was a responsibility that came with their talent and their individualism, if you like. So I guess it's possible, but we don't quite know what the plan is. Where if we buy Eze, where is he going to play? Is it going to be left 8? But that's where Declan Rice plays. And with Mendy at the 6, it seems unlikely that Declan Rice is going to move to a different position. So is he Odegaard cover replacement alternative? Is he a left wing alternative replacement? Where exactly do we go with this? Do we maybe shift formation? Are we looking at Eze as a kind of a 10 with 2 8s? I don't know. You see, this is where I'm really curious about what we do with him, because it feels to me sort of not like the Mikel Arteta that we've come to know and understand, where the players that he signs are very much, not all together, but system players who he can slot in and do a specific job in that sense. So I'm kind of encouraged by this Eze link and news and the fact that it appears to be a developing situation, because it also suggests maybe that there is maybe a willingness on Mikel Arteta's part to do things a little bit differently, or a confidence on his part that he can bring a player like that in and get what he wants out of them, despite the fact it doesn't look on paper that he would be a very obvious starter in any one position, right? So that's about maybe building squad depth. And listen, there's going to be a lot of football, Premier League games, Champions League games, cup games. The biggest issue we had last season was a very small squad having to play, you know, a small group of players having to play most of the minutes, and that idea isn't comfortable with rotating, I think is an interesting one as well. So maybe this tells us that that's something that he's going to implement next season. So yeah, you can have a worry about that, but I think there's a flip side of that argument, which is pretty encouraging, assuming that deal goes through.
Yeah. Hopefully, you know, because you know, I watched some games last season and I was kind of screaming at the TV of changing a little bit, changing something. Don't go all the games the same, because obviously other teams, other coaches, other managers, they figure you out. So it gets harder and harder. So maybe this is the season where Arteta will show us something different. Absolutely. I'm looking forward if that's the case. So going back a little bit to the Wenger times, do you think that the expectations nowadays are heavier than back in the Wenger title years?
I think because we came close, they're in the same kind of ballpark. The thing about the Wenger years and the sort of fallow years, if you like, that period where we didn't win anything for 9 years, is that they followed an era of pretty much unprecedented success for Arsenal. You know, 2 doubles, the Invincibles season. You know, we probably should have won more in that time as well. You know, so that raised the bar very, very high. Very high. And every season that we failed to win something, we were further and further away from what people expected from Arsenal. This time around, yes, the expectation is there. Yes, we have demonstrated that we can come very close, but I think we also understand that we live in a different football era. You know, that period when Arsenal were winning things, it was really only Arsenal and Manchester United who could win it. And there's been that sort of 2-team thing going on with Liverpool and Manchester City for quite a number of years. But what's happened in the Premier League over the last 4 or 5 years, I think is that despite the fact City have won, all these trophies and titles, is that generally speaking, the level of the Premier League has become higher. Technical level has become higher. The coaching level has become higher. The organizational level has become higher. Teams are more difficult to play against. Even the so-called smaller teams are really well coached and really well organized. Think of somebody like Bournemouth, right? A small club on the south coast with a tiny stadium, and yet they bring in a really brilliant Basque coach, and he, for a period last season had them in the, top 5, top 6, and things fell away as they can do. But I think you're looking at that, teams like Brighton. So it becomes a bit more difficult, I think, to properly predict who can do what. But because we came and have come second for 3 years in a row, I think that has raised the expectation levels of Arsenal fans. I think part of the frustration of last season was that the expectation was second, we've got to get first this time.
Yeah.
And it became clear 2/3 of the way through the season we're not going to get first. So we didn't meet our expectations. And that then leads into the frustration and the anger and the recrimination and all of those things. But the difference, I suppose, is that the expectations of the Wenger era were built on trophies. And the expectations of this particular era are built on what we almost did. Not what we did, but what we almost did, So I think expectations will be high next season because we're going to spend quite a bit of money, I think, this summer. We're going to address those issues. We got to the semi-finals of the Champions League, which is really good. Obviously, you come close and you want more, but I think it is a step forward. It was a step forward in Europe last season. That's going to add another layer to the expectations. Can we get to the semi-finals again? Can we beat Real Madrid, or can we beat AC Milan or PSG or Barcelona, whoever it is? I think the thing is, when you go and play those games now, people will expect Arsenal to win. They won't think it's easy, but they will expect Arsenal to win, for the most part. So it is a challenge, but I think it's better to have those expectations than be sitting there wondering, oh my God, how do we get to that level, which is where we were not too long ago.
Yeah. And it's been a couple of years, but yeah, definitely we're not in a good place. And I feel it even over here, right? Because here in Romania we have late night kickoffs, and they're a killer here. So basically, in the last 3 years when we've been second, I can't miss them, right? Even if it means, and I hope my boss doesn't check this podcast, but the working next day is kind of a write-off, right? So you just can't switch off when Arsenal is in a title race, which it has been for the last 3 years, which is incredible. And you mentioned something very interesting about the fact that we didn't have a big enough squad, or we had a smaller squad. But looking at what Arsenal did this summer until now, right? Zubimendi for Partey, Norgard for Jorginho, Mosquera probably will come in for Kivior or Zinchenko or Tierney. So we're losing a couple of defenders there. Then we bring in Kepa for Neto, and we're probably going to add 1 or 2 players to our attacking area. Do you think that's enough because until now we kind of have like for like replacement, right? So do you think the squad will be bigger enough if we only buy a striker and let's say a winger or someone like Eze who can play multiple roles?
Well, I mean, I think the thing to say is that I don't know if you saw this report yesterday. David Ornstein was talking about Eze and was saying that would be separate from a striker and a winger. So you're looking at maybe 3 additions higher up the pitch, which I think does give us more depth because, you could rattle off the players: Saka, Waneri, Havertz, Trossard, Martinelli, Eze, winger, striker. And then you've got Gabriel Jesus to come back as well. So that's quite a lot. In midfield, you can play Havertz in midfield. You can also play Waneri in midfield. Then you've got Marino, you've got Rice, you've got Zubimendi, you've got Norgard. I mean, that seems quite a lot to me. And then the other end of the pitch, which you referenced, I think what's the way we have to look at it is like this. There's a reason why Neto played only one game last season. And that was because Mikel Arteta did not view him as a credible alternative to David Raya. So David Raya had to play all the games, all the cup games, all the Champions League games.
Do you think it has something to do with the fact that Neto tried to...
Yes.
He tried to stop a shot or whatever with his hands outside the box. I think it had something to do.
Maybe. I just think, he was a really last gasp way of filling a place in the squad. We didn't manage that properly last season, the alternative goalkeeper. I think in Kepa, you've got a player who will definitely play the cup games, will play some of the Champions League games, and therefore you're not putting as much of a burden on David Raya. So you keep him a bit fresher, and his performance levels, I think, were very good. Towards the end of the season, I think you could see that he got a bit tired, a bit fatigued. Whether it was physical or mental, I think you could see that. Mosquera, if he comes in, gives you an alternative to William Saliba. Therefore, Saliba is fresher, less fatigued. You don't put as much of a burden on him. And the reality, I suppose, as well, is that last season, we were looking at either Ben White or Jurriën Timber being the backup for William Saliba. But Ben White had to have an operation, and Timber played a lot of the season with an injury, and Thomas Partey had to play a lot of football at right back last season, which is not ideal. So I think what you're doing is you're building in that depth into those areas. So even if Zinchenko leaves and Tierney is left, I don't think it's a situation where we are worse off. I think if you've got players who can play, then even if perhaps the overall number is a little bit smaller, you've got more depth. Mosquera can play in both central defensive positions. Calafiori can play on the left side of the centre halves as well as playing left back. Kivior could stay, who knows? My own personal feeling is he will probably go. But even so, if you've got players who are available and fit to play, then you have the depth that you need. So it's about not just the numbers, but the quality of those players. Are they credible options for you if you're picking a team to go and win a game tomorrow? If you've got a league game between two Champions League games and you need to rotate, can you use those players? And if you can, then you've got the depth.
And of course, you need to think about the players that you bring in as substitute players. You need to tell them that when you sign them, right? So they need to agree that they might not get as much playing time as at their, current clubs or something like that. So you need to find the right balance. Mm-hmm. And again, we know Havertz is a Arteta favorite, so he needs to find a way to, he's on big wages as well, so you want to play him. He's very smart. He can really play, he has a really good link up play and whatever else. But yeah, as you mentioned, there's a lot of things you need to take in consideration, not just going and buying everything that you can. What's your biggest worry about this transfer window?
I suppose it is the striker. And I'm not even that worried about it, because it seems pretty obvious that Arsenal know this is something they have got to do and they've got to get right. So that's kind of it, really, is like, just get that done and let's all move on with our lives and look forward to next season, I don't think, I'm not worried about us not getting that deal done. I do think we'll do it in time as well. It's not going to be something that goes to the end of the transfer window. I think when you look at the start of the season and when you look at the fixtures that we have, we need that player in pretty soon, to help him settle in and go on the preseason tour maybe and get to know his teammates and get to know the style of play, all those things. I think there's always a worry with Arsenal that things take a bit longer than they should, but I'm hoping with the new sporting director and the focus that we've got on what we need to do this summer, that won't be an issue. So that's kind of it. It's that thing. It's the big decision that we have to make. And until we make that decision, nobody's going to relax properly at all. So that would be the only one. I don't think there's too many issues in terms of selling players. We'll sell a couple of players, 2 or 3 will probably leave, get some money in. But just get that deal done and make everybody relax.
Relax, yeah. And as you mentioned, not everyone will be happy because some will want a player over the other, but you can make absolutely everybody happy and satisfied on that.
Not unless you buy Alexander Isak, and I don't think it's possible, Unfortunately.
When you said, you mentioned, what if we don't get Sesko or Gyökeres and we get someone, and you made a comparison to Eduardo da Silva back in when we got him from Dinamo Zagreb, and I was thinking Isak is not quite as, let's say, unknown as Eduardo or unexpected, but yeah, I had to say that I thought about it, maybe, but I don't know.
It's very easy, isn't it, to see Alexander Isak in red and white, wearing the number 14 and scoring goals for Arsenal. We can all envisage that very, very easily.
Who knows? Maybe Berda can flex a bit and make it happen.
Who knows?
But it's pretty, unrealistic. So let's stick with whatever it is. So, Andrew, can I take you back a little bit, right? 20 plus years ago, you started Arseblog before YouTube even existed. What made you hit publish for the first time?
Well, I've told the story before, and I'll keep it very simple and quick, but I was trying to learn web design and learn how to be a web designer. This was back in 2002. And to cut a long story very short, I'm not that good at web design. I learned that pretty quickly, but I enjoy writing and I enjoy talking about Arsenal. So that's kind of where my focus shifted from having this website that I could use to practice web design into it becoming something that I sort of just enjoyed doing as a hobby, really. Back in 2002, it was a very different world, a very different online world as well, so it's just developed over the years into what it's become now. So yeah, it was that. But then you fall into this position of people reading what you're writing about a football club that we all support and all love and all want to do well, and then there's sort of a responsibility to your audience to keep things going and to move with the times, if you like, and do different things. So listen, when I started it, I never had any idea that it would end up being what it is now, that it could possibly be my job. That was ridiculous. There was genuinely, it wasn't possible. It was impossible. It was not even a consideration in 2002 that I could be still doing it in 2025 and for it to be, the bulk of my working life. So it just shows you how things can change in ways that you don't necessarily expect. And obviously in very positive ways for me, because, I'm very lucky and very privileged to be able to do what I do.
And, you probably went through this, right? Because you never thought it's gonna be for so long. And I remember you said you're gonna stop the podcast when Arsenal will win a title, but that was, I think, 10 years ago, or 7-8 years ago.
Did I say that?
Yeah, you said it on. You talked with James, and you were, I think, on your 200. You're celebrating a milestone,
Right.
and you and James said, we said we're going to do this until Arsenal are going to win a title, so buckle up everybody because it's going to take a while or something like
Okay, that makes sense.
that. What was the moment you realized that it's more than just a side project? Because obviously, social media and everything came after a while, after a couple of years since you started blogging.
I mean, there was a sort of period in the late 2000s where Arseblog was bought by a company called Ole Ole, who wanted to build a big football social network. Again, to cut a long story short, it didn't work for them. And I had to sort of make a decision about Arseblog. Did I keep it going? Did I have to go back and get in inverted commas, a real job? But they were paying me at that point, and then it's like, well, if they're paying me, there's obviously some value to what I'm doing. And so when it went wrong for them and I sort of went on my own again, I knew that there was the potential there for Arseblog to generate some revenue, whether it was advertising or sponsorships or things like that. So I had to sort of take that seriously. I'm really not good at that stuff, I don't know what the value of anything I do is, to be honest. When it comes to advertising campaigns and those kinds of things. But it was that point, from then on, it became, let's say, semi-professional. And then when you have the advent of podcast advertising, that's a different revenue stream. And then Patreon subscriptions, allowed us to get rid of all the advertising on the website. We don't have any ads at all. So all of our content is supported by our readers and our listeners. And it gives you, not that we didn't have it already, but editorial independence. So you're not having to write loads of articles to get clicks, to get ads and those kinds of things. So it makes it more of a sort of an independent product, if you like. So you're not beholden to any advertiser or any sponsor. There's no pressure to generate revenue by going, getting people to click here, there, and everywhere. That everyone knows who spends any time online, the transfer stories, the clickbait, the sort of, the headlines like Spanish international talks about Arsenal move. And you go, ooh, what's that? And then it tells you a story, about Santi Cazorla, who's reminiscing about the time he signed from Malaga in 2012, right? You're like, oh, God, I thought this was going to be like a news story. But those are the kinds of things that we don't do. We never did them, but we especially don't have to do them because, we've got a fantastic community, fantastic readers and listeners who are willing to support what we do. Because I think they appreciate that side of things, but also, there is the other side where they get extra stuff as well. So it's really developed over the years. It was never like one moment, but it was just sort of little steps to get to where we are now.
And that's really well said, because anyone who is listening or who will listen to this and will try to do something, they need to understand that there's and I don't know, should I use this word? As a process, right? You go step by step, you take it easy, and it gets you somewhere, right?
Yeah. Plus, you have to be ready to go in maybe a different direction than you thought you were going to go. That something happens and you have to go, oh, right, we're going to go that way now. So never be afraid to take a chance, or even if you have your own ideas, if something becomes really obvious, I'm not saying do the obvious thing every time, but don't overlook that in the, if you have your own ideas. I think it's great to have your own ideas and to implement them, but you've also got to be aware of what people want, how they want to consume your content, your podcast, your blog, your YouTube channel, whatever it is. You have to be ready to give them what they want as well.
When you mention the your let's say acquisition, right, by Ole Ole, not yours, but the Arseblog, Did you, because you mentioned you thought if you'll have to go back to a regular job and so on, was that a moment when you thought about stopping, or was there another moment that was very difficult?
No, not really. I mean, again, without going into too many details, there was a financial problem with Ole Ole, which left me with a big financial problem. So then you're like, well, I've got a family, and I've got a mortgage, and I've got bills to pay. Can I take the risk of going this way, or do I go the more sensible, I guess, route of, right, I can go out and work every day from 9 to 5 doing something. I don't know what at this point in my life. I don't know what. So that was the most difficult part, really, was to try and decide, whether I could do that, whether I could do that quickly enough, and whether I could do that successfully enough to basically save my house and have a place to live and keep a roof over our heads here. So that was the most difficult part. Since then, there's always things that are challenging and things that are not easy with everybody's work life. Whether you do what I do, or you go to work every day, or you drive a bus, or you work in a factory, or whatever it is, there are going to be periods where that job is more challenging than others, right? And again, I don't for one second think that what I do is comparable to people who go out every day and work really long hours and struggle and manual all of those things are much more difficult than what I do. But I think it's all relative to your own experience, that whatever job you're doing, there are going to be days where you have good days and days where you don't have such good days, right? That's just normal. But really, that was the one moment where it was very, very difficult to know what the right thing to do was, and I sort of went with my gut instinct, and thankfully that paid off.
Yeah, thankfully for us as well. So when you discussed a little bit about challenges, I've got to ask. I remembered an episode where you started with I think you call it lasagna disaster story or something like that. It was, pretty relatable because we were all stressed about Arsenal. You got the podcast out. We were like, okay, let's listen to what's happening. But you were actually dealing with real life lasagna trauma, So I wanted to ask you, how does the real life stuff, right, that you go through help you stay grounded after 20 years of covering Arsenal, which is basically a roller coaster?
I have to say, I don't remember that lasagna incident, but I believe you, because that's what tends to happen is, like, people remember things that I say and write, which I don't, because there's so much, But I know from, for example, my own experience of listening to people and reading people, that there are stories they tell or what have you that really stick in my mind. So I don't really remember that one. But listen, at the end of the day, I'm just a normal guy. I'm like anybody listening to this. I as I said, I'm lucky to have a platform like I do, and I don't take it for granted. But at the end of the day, I'm just like a regular guy. I like to go and have a few beers, or play football, or play a game of golf, and to sort of hope for the best for the world, if you know what I mean, and for the people around me, and ultimately that's kind of where I am, or where I've always been, is I never have think of myself as any better than any other Arsenal fan. I'm not. I'm just an Arsenal fan like you, or whoever's listening, or anybody that you stop on the street in Romania or anywhere in the world. They're an Arsenal fan. I'm an Arsenal fan. You're an Arsenal fan. And we are, to my mind, the same. I think the danger would be to think that I'm more important than anybody else, which I'm not. I think there are probably some people out there, not just in the Arsenal content world, but in the football content world, who perhaps get a little bit carried away with the audience they have, or they think maybe they're a bit more important than they actually are. And to me, that's always been the thing that's kept me grounded. You know, I recognize, you know, that football these days is a global thing, right? It absolutely is. There are fans of the Premier League all over the world, and that's because of the internet and TV coverage and everything else. But I've always been cognizant of the fact that that's sort of like an expanding balloon, if you like, right? And that balloon starts in North London. And Arsenal is a London club. And I'm not saying fans in London are better than anybody, but their experience is very different, and it's unique and it's local, as you know. And, you know, if I, for tomorrow, decided to start supporting some Romanian club, I have to recognize and understand that there are people local to that club who know more about it, who know more about the experience than I do. Maybe I can learn, and lots of people learn along the way, and that's great. But I'm an Irish guy who started a website about an English team while I was living in Spain, and then moved back to Ireland. And that's my experience. That is my orbit, if you like. So to sort of put yourself on any kind of pedestal was always absurd to me. So I think just that, and the fact that, like I said, I'm just a fucking regular guy who goes to the supermarket like anyone else. That is sort of the foundation, if you like, of my Arseblog experience. And I think it's wonderful because we have a community and readers and listeners from all over the world. It's incredible, you know. But for me to think, well, I'm better than him, I'm better than Mihai, I'm better than John, I'm better than Mary, I'm better. That's not right. So,
and as you said, even if you're on a pedestal, you know, lasagna still can give you a hard time, no matter how high you are. You know, like
yeah, exactly, exactly, yeah. We can all have that dodgy lasagna. It doesn't matter how rich you are or anything else. You can have that bad lasagna and pay the price like everybody else.
It gets to you,
yeah.
How you know, and that's probably good advice for any content creator, me and as well, being at relatively at the beginning. How do you manage to stay passionate even when, you know, Arsenal are not fun?
Because that's kind of what being a fan is about. I think that every summer, from the time I've been supporting Arsenal, from like that high to whatever height I am now, there was always that thing in my heart, whether it was right or wrong, and very often wrong, obviously, but that thing in my heart, that little bit of that slice of optimism that, hey, you never know. This year could be our year. It's
what keeps you going, huh?
It's what keeps you going. I think you have to have that. I realize, you know, some people don't have that disposition. Some people can get annoyed or fed up, and they're like, I've had enough of this. It costs me too much. I think as well, you have to be aware that all of this is completely and utterly out of your control. That you are committing to something that you have no influence over whatsoever. So you can wear your lucky socks, or drink your coffee out of your lucky mug, or wear your lucky shirt, but really, it's what those 11 guys do on the pitch, and we can't do anything about that. So you have to be aware of that. I think you also have to be able to just step back and look at things objectively, and recognize that it's kind of a bit crazy to do what we do, to invest so much of our emotion and time into something that we have no control over. And we allow it then to alter our moods, right? So Saturday afternoon, Arsenal play a game, they win. We're in great form on Saturday night. And Sunday we wake up, even if you got a bit of a hangover on a Sunday, you're like, doesn't matter. Arsenal won yesterday. I'm happy.
Yeah.
Arsenal lose that game, and the mood in the house is not that great that night. Maybe the rest of the family, they go to a different room and watch a movie while you're sitting there sulking. No, it's not like that. But you know what I mean? It does have a material impact on our moods, and by extension, the moods of the people that we live with, our families and those things, So it's kind of insane. So once you're on board with that little bit of insanity, I think you can keep yourself passionate about it. And look, it gets frustrating. It can make you angry. It can make you react in ways that ordinarily you wouldn't react to anything else in your life. But it's mad. And sometimes at the end of all the madness, you get a trophy and everyone's happy. And that's kind of what it's all about.
Yeah, very well said. And yeah, sometimes, you're kind of in a bad spot because you were expecting a win or hoping for a win, or you get a draw or a narrow loss because of a dodgy decision and so on. But at the same time, you have a family, you have, other things. Although I did read a couple of blogs, more than one, unfortunately, that you were saying like, oh, I went to bed and I was thinking, how am I going to start the blog tomorrow? What am I going to say? How am I going to treat this one? But yeah, you're absolutely right. Now, one more thing I think that will help the content creators. If you could go back in time and give a younger Andrew a tip, what would that be? What would you tell your younger self?
That's a great question. I'm not entirely sure, to be honest, because I kind of feel like the outlook I've always had is when I talk about Arsenal is to just be honest about what I think, because then I think you can always stand by what you've written or what you've said. It doesn't mean you're always right. I've got lots of things wrong over the years, and I think that's normal. But I can genuinely say, well, that's kind of how I felt at the time. Is that right? Is it wrong? Does the passage of time make that opinion look a bit worse, or maybe sometimes a bit better? I don't know. But I think once you're honest about what you say and what you write, then you kind of are okay. What would I say? I might just say enjoy those trophy years a bit more, because I'm not saying I took it for granted, but there's that sense that, okay, we're brilliant. We have an amazing team and we're winning the double, and we've got Henry and we've got Bergkamp, and you realize then eras like that in football, generally speaking, for a club like Arsenal anyway, that isn't propped up by 115 things. Those eras can be quite short, that everything in football is cyclical, I should say, not circular is the other word I was going to use there. But when you have those periods of being really good, you should enjoy them as much as possible. And that's kind of why, even if I've been a bit sad and a bit frustrated at times over the last couple of years that we haven't been able to get the trophies, I think you have to recognize as well that this is a very, very good Arsenal team. And, you don't have to go back too far to see a much worse Arsenal team, and an Arsenal team that was a lot less fun than the ones we have now. So I feel like that would be my advice, that when things are good, when you've got a good team, when you've got a load of players that you like, enjoy that team, because it won't be long before it goes the other way and it's full of guys you're going, oh God, not him. So that would be my thing.
Yeah. Do you think creators like podcasters and whoever else, do you feel a responsibility to calm down the chaos when it happens?
No, that's not up to me. I can only do what I do, and people can react to that the way that they want to react to it. I'm never going to be a guy who's like shouting and screaming into a camera. It's not what I do. It's not what I enjoy watching. I know there are people out there who do that, and I know there are people out there who enjoy that, and good luck. Like, I'm not being critical. There's something for everyone, right? So I do things my way. The only thing I can ever be responsible for is what I say and what I write and what I put out into the world. After that, it's not my responsibility. And I don't feel like it's my responsibility, you know, to call out other people for doing things the way they want to do them. That's entirely up to them. And I respect that, even if, you know, some of it is not to my taste. You go and do what you want to do. Who am I to tell you what to do with your life or your YouTube channel or your podcast? So that makes my life less complicated. The idea that you would do that and then you just end up in these battles with people, you know, oh, he's said this about you, and then he'll say something about you, and then you respond to that. And then it's like, who has the time or the energy to deal with that? Not me. So yeah. I don't feel that responsibility. I feel responsibility for Arseblog, but not anything else.
Yeah, that's good answer. And you know, I want to go back a little bit to Arsenal. You said again, you talked with James in one of your podcasts, and I remember this. It was a couple of years ago, and you mentioned something about shark cages for our defense, because we're getting a lot of goals, and I think you mentioned that in a couple of podcasts. Yeah, I wasn't sure if that was. I mean, I knew it was a joke, but it was coming out of pure frustration. Looking at how tight Arsenal's defense is now, having Saliba and Gabriel and Timber and Miles Lewis-Skelly really stepping up, and all our defensive players, do we now have a title-winning defense?
Yes, I think we do. I think we've seen over the last couple of years that the platform, the defensive platform, has been really, really good, and you know, Gabriel and Saliba again, you know, have been excellent. There's probably no better central defensive partnership in the world. I'm just going to look up the stats here again. That, you know, did Arsenal concede the fewest goals last season? I'm not sure, maybe just there or thereabouts, but you know, the issue last season, why is it showing me? Oh, I know what it is. Match week 38, that's what I need to see. So in terms of goals against, yeah, we had the best defensive record in the Premier League last season. The issue was
on the other,
scored more goals.
Yeah,
right?
On the other end of the pitch.
Yeah, so Liverpool conceded 7 more goals than Arsenal last season. That's a title-winning defense, if you can also score a lot of goals up the other end. Yeah. You know, and to be fair, Liverpool had, you know, some fantastic players in their defense. Virgil van Dijk was brilliant last season. Konate is very good. Robertson, you know, Trent Alexander-Arnold. They've got good players in there. But it was really about what they did at the other end of the pitch and scoring those goals. And that's why I think it is so important that Arsenal do the right business in the attacking third, and give ourselves the best chance to break down teams who are going to be hard to break down, as well as, you know, maybe changing the way we attack, maybe a little bit more counter-attacking threat. You know, too many Arsenal counter-attacks broke down last season. We didn't move the ball quickly enough and get it into the right positions. A lot of the time for the no striker. You know, Mikel Merino did a great job. Fair play to him, but like, you know, he's not going to be the guy who scores a goal on the breakaway, is he? You know, so those are the things that I'm looking at. I think the defense is really, really good. I think Saliba and Gabriel will probably be better again next season. Saliba's more mature, coming into his prime years as a central defender. It's hard to imagine that he can get better, but I think he will. So yeah,
Gabriel has a new hamstring.
Yeah, he's got a brand new hamstring, so it's all good. So I don't worry too much about the defense. You know, I worry about our ability to score goals, and that sort of brings us back around to that question you asked earlier about my big worry for the transfer window. It is the forward. It is the forwards, if you like, and hopefully we'll see some movement on that over the coming days or
Sooner,
weeks. Anyway.
hopefully sooner. Yeah, I need a goodly morning from you guys. So.
Yeah, we need one too.
All right, Andrew. Let's wrap it up with a few quick ones. No overthinking this one's, okay?
Okay.
Favorite Arsenal player of all time? Let me guess first. Can I try a guess?
Yeah.
Is it Robert Pires?
Yes, it is Robert Pires. Is he the best Arsenal player of all time? No, but is he my favorite Arsenal player of all time? Yes, he is. Just a really stylish, exciting player who scored goals with a kind of nonchalance that I really liked. So yeah, Robert Pires.
Who is the most underrated player in the current squad?
Well, we got asked this the other day, actually, on the Arscast Extra, and I gave a big, long answer about Takehiro Tomiyasu, who I genuinely think is a very underrated player because he can play in every position in the back four, left back, both centre-half positions, and right back. It's a real shame what's happened to him in terms of the injuries, but I think he is the guy that I would go for.
That's a really, really good answer. And I think you're right. Hopefully we'll see him play some games. Fingers crossed on that one.
Yeah.
If you had to podcast about another club, who would it be?
It would be a nightclub or something. I couldn't podcast about another football club. I just really couldn't do it. I don't think you can do it legitimately and honestly unless you're a fan of that club.
Yeah.
Because ultimately what will happen is you'll just get fed up with it and say, I can't be bothered doing this. So there isn't another club that has a place in my heart like Arsenal. So I don't know.
That's true love for Arsenal.
A nightclub, a tennis club. I don't know. I don't think I could do it. I'd do something else.
And can you complete the following sentence when I say blank? If Arsenal win the league next season, I will blank.
Have a live on-air party, drinking champagne and playing music for the readers and listeners.
And I do hope that Arsenal will win the league next season. Not only for this reason, but there's an extra reason there.
Sure, exactly. The more important one is the champagne and the music, and then after. No, I'm kidding. Of course, we all want Arsenal to do it. So yeah, that's my commitment. If we win the league next season, I'll do a live stream playing music and all the rest.
Great. That's great to hear, Andrew. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you so much for joining me in and for everything you've done with Arseblog. You've truly built something iconic in the Arsenal world.
Guys, can I ask you a question before we go?
Sure.
I was curious as to, the Arsenal support in Romania and supporters clubs there. Are Arsenal, a big deal in Romania?
They're not as big. I mean, it varies what big means, right? For me, having a couple of thousands of supporters here that have their own fan page on Facebook and Instagram and all that, that's a big deal, right? They go to games together, they form groups, they meet, and they watch games. And when I'm talking about them as kind of an outside thing, is because they're located in another town, right?
Sure.
But obviously, I was surprised when I found out about how many they are, because I don't necessarily expect, we're a couple of thousands that are supporting Arsenal here in Romania, which is it's a lot, right? And the community gets bigger because I see people getting in and commenting and going on the community pages all the time. So it shows, the love for Arsenal is international and global, as you mentioned.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, that's the thing. It develops and it grows, and the supporters clubs become much bigger, and just little by little, these things take time to grow. So, yeah, just a big hello and thank you to all the Romanian Arsenal supporters out there who might be listening to this, and I hope you all have a great summer.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Andrew. Again, guys, if you're not already following him, go check out arseblog.com. Subscribe to the Arscast and follow Andrew on his socials. I'll put all the links in the description. If you enjoyed this chat and conversation, don't forget to subscribe, comment, share, all the good stuff. Really helps us grow and bring more great guests like today. Thanks for tuning in. And as always, up the Arsenal.